Hello YouTube, Pipe Boy here, coming to you once again from the Sanctuary, and it is time to do another movie review over a pipe. Yeah, and as you can see, attempting to do so while at the same time honing and perfecting my ever so precious Stephen W140 skills in talking while clenching a pipe. A particular set of skills that makes me a nightmare for people who can't talk and clench a pipe at the same time. I will look for you, and I will find you. Anyway, me being silly. This evening's movie review will be over the latest James Bond action extravaganza entitled Skyfall. But first, the housekeeping. As you can see, I'm about to light up for the very first time and enjoy for the very first time my newest Boswell pipe, which I featured as last week's MVP on Friday Night Pipes. This is my Boswell Baby Jumbo 3 freehand with a burnt autumn finish all around. Gorgeous, gorgeous, and even more gorgeous. Gentle plateauing there on the rim, which is typical of most freehands, and some matching plateauing here at the end of the shank, and a beautiful, like topaz or deep sapphire navy blue freehand acrylic stem. Absolutely fantastic, love it. And in it I am smoking my very favorite tobacco of all time in the history of mankind as we know it, none other than Boswell's Piper's Pleasure. Sure. You can see it there. There we go. So, here's to y'all. Skyfall. I saw it about a week and a half ago. And this is the third outing for Daniel Craig as James Bond. Now, it is by necessity or default that you cannot discuss these latest three outings or James Bond installments without also discussing the fact that it's Daniel Craig playing James Bond as opposed to Pierce Brosnan, who was the Bond before him, or any of the other alternatives to Daniel Craig that were being considered, such people such as Clive Owen, for example, or maybe even Ray Fiennes, who is in Skyfall, oddly enough. But and the reason I say that is because when Daniel Craig first got the role of Bond, an enormous amount of criticism was hurled at him. He was too blonde. He wasn't pretty enough. He wasn't tall enough. He couldn't drive a stick shift. So forth and so on. And he had so much against him coming into the role of Bond, that whereas the pressure would have caused most actors to just crumble and give up or not put in as good a performance as they could, Daniel Craig essentially doubled down and decided to prove all the naysayers wrong. And Casino Royale, the first Bond film that he acted in as Bond, which was essentially a reboot of the whole Bond franchise, was a spectacular box office success around the world. And subsequent to that, he made Quantum of Solace, which was a continuation of the storyline from Casino Royale. And that was somewhat more lukewarm in its response, both critical and I believe box office returns. But nonetheless, they stayed with it with Daniel Craig for a third outing. And the third outing, which was released not too long ago, is Skyfall. And if you're a Bond aficionado of any level, novice or hardcore fan, you know that most Bond fanatics consider Goldfinger to be the apex or the absolute best Bond film in the franchise. And until I saw Skyfall, I would have agreed with you, with maybe some other arguments that would maybe qualify that assessment. However, since having seen Skyfall, I will tell you that there is a very, and I mean very, good argument to be made that Skyfall may very well be the best Bond movie ever, notwithstanding the fact that it stars Daniel Craig as Bond rather than Sean Connery. And don't get me wrong, in my estimation, I do believe that Sean Connery is still the best example of Bond. I think he is the closest incarnation to what Ian Fleming had in mind when he wrote the novels of Bond's escapades. But that being said, I'd like to talk more about Skyfall in terms of Daniel Craig as Bond as opposed to, say, Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan took on the role of Bond in '95 after Timothy Dalton. This was after some long, drawn-out court battle between the studio and the filmmakers. They finally got it resolved, and in '95, Pierce Brosnan, after having once been given the role and then having had it taken away from him again, as a result of a contract dispute with NBC back in the '80s, was finally given a second chance at Bond. And as a result, because of the following he had as Remington Steele with NBC back in the '80s, and also the various other projects that he had done since then, had become more of a sentimental favorite, as well as being seen as a natural choice to play Bond. And I think he picked up the role at a very good age in his life, in his mid-40s, because essentially he had lost a lot of his prettiness and become more rugged looking and a bit more mature. That I think his maturity better suited the role of Bond at that point in his life. Well, he went on to make 4 films, all of them very, very, very successful, brought in record numbers. Of the 4, I think GoldenEye was his best, not just because of the anticipation, but because I think it was shot in such a way that it didn't just cater to the normal formula of Bond, as in the Roger Moore days, when it was pretty much the same thing that you could expect, maybe with different characters. I think the Bond series under Brosnan's tenure kind of devolved into getting back to that, more goofy antics and, corny jokes and one-liners and what have you, and some outrageous gadgets. He gets done with his contract, and in comes Daniel Craig. And Daniel Craig, despite all the criticism, takes Bond and runs with it. And he absolutely is the baddest Bond since Connery, notwithstanding Pierce Brosnan. But if you want to get into the basic hard truth about it, Pierce Brosnan as Bond was very good. But as Bond, he looked like a businessman who carried a weapon. Daniel Craig as Bond looks like a businessman who is a weapon. And in Skyfall, the basic premise is that Javier Bardem, who plays the villain Silva, is a former agent with MI6 who is seeking revenge against M, played by Dame Judi Dench, for atrocities that were committed against him by her administration years ago when he had gone rogue. And he's trying to get back at her. And as you see in the ads, he is telling her to think on her sins, for she will be made to pay for them very soon. In the meantime, M is trying to capture and regain a computer hard drive that contains all the true identities of agents from MI6 who are currently stationed around the world from getting into the wrong hands. And Bond is sent on the assignment. And while on the assignment in the beginning of the film, he suffers an injury from supposedly friendly fire and is presumed dead until such time as he comes back later and picks up his skills once again, and once again a particular set of skills, to go after Javier Bardem's character of Silva. Skyfall, and I'm trying to give you some detailed explanation of the premise of the film without giving away too much, and I think I've succeeded in keeping most of it under close wraps and not spoiling anything. But Skyfall is a Bond lover's treat. It is the 50th anniversary of James Bond in the movies. The first movie being Dr. No with Sean Connery, and 50 years later now we have Skyfall. And being that it's the anniversary of 50 years, there are numerous nods and winks to previous Bond films. If you are a follower of all the films, you'll see various scenes and things done that will immediately recall your mind to that Bond film or that Bond actor. It's just a delight, a treat, if you're into the Bond franchise as much as I am. I highly recommend that you go see Skyfall. One thing about Skyfall that I absolutely love was something that wasn't in it as much as, say, in the Brosnan films, and that is shameless product placement. With the Brosnan Bond films, it got to the point where it became less of an action movie and more of a 2-hour-long billboard for various products to make you want to go out and spend money and think that you're Bond, or, you know someone named Bond, I guess. But there is a great cutback on that in Skyfall, and I think it's very refreshing. Also, Skyfall is refreshingly low-tech. Yes, you don't see... In fact, I think Piper and CHS mentioned that, although he's into lasers and all sorts of high-tech gadgetry, Skyfall is surprisingly low-tech, and I think it works a lot as well as it does because it's low-tech. You're not distracted by the invisible cars and, jetpacks and exploding pens and, briefcases that conceal knives and what have you. There is maybe 1 or 2 gadgets in there, but that's really about it. It's more driven by human skill and hand-to-hand sort of combat and what have you. But go see Skyfall. You may not think it's better than Goldfinger. I think it is, and I'm sure that I will see it a second time, if not in theaters, then definitely when it comes out on DVD. I might even just download the thing on my iPhone, or just get the DVD and do it old school, if that's considered still old school. But anyway, that's my review / ramble over a pipe. I think Skyfall is a definite 2 pipes up, as was Taken 2. 2 pipes up for that movie as well. I forgot to mention back then. But That about does it. Until next time, this is Pipe Lawyer saying cheers, and as always, remember, I'll present the evidence, but you be the judge. Take care, good night, and God bless.